Not long ago, I made a community post with the caption, "Gregory victim confirmed," and inserted this image. This was very obviously a joke. It was a meme my friend sent in a group chat on Discord. And while most people thought it was funny, some people literally took it seriously for some reason. And while I do believe Gregory victim in some way, it's clearly not confirmed. And that's actually going to be the topic for today's theory. Who is Gregory? Is he a normal kid? And who is Freddy? This video was originally going to come out in early January, but the day I was planning to finish up the script, MadPat uploaded his theory on it, and it was literally the exact same theory and even more. So I decided not to make the video, but I kept the script. But then I began believing something different, which is going to be the topic for the theory. So now, without further ado, let's talk about Gregory and Freddy. Before Security Breach came out, a lot of people pointed out that Gregory looked similar to the bite victim, mostly due to his striped shirt. Some people even went as far as to say Gregory was the bite victim, but obviously this can't be the case since they are born quite literally about 50 years apart, so Gregory can't be the bite victim. But it is possible that he's a recreation of the bite victim, or a representation at least. Let me explain. At the beginning of the game, when Freddy scans Gregory, he says, "How odd, your guest profile is unknown to me, who are you?" So Gregory isn't a casual guest, he broke into the Pizzaplex. This is what the security breach is, Gregory breaking in. The question is though, why does he break in just to break out again a few hours later? Well, I think I have an answer. The Fazbear Frights books strongly hint that Freddy's locations can lure people in, but they always lure a specific person in for a reason. Most of the time it's because they've suffered, or have a traumatic past, and the leave ending of Security Breach shows that Gregory is a child who suffers. He is a homeless orphan. Gregory doesn't have parents, and he doesn't have a home. He sleeps inside a cardboard box. Why is that? Is he just an orphan? Well, the answer's kind of complicated. Yes and no. Gregory doesn't have parents, but he also technically never did. Not only is there no record of Gregory at the Pizzaplex, there's actually no record of him at all. Vanessa tells us so at 3:15 a.m.
I found him earlier and locked him up and lost and found.
That is great news. He can be returned to his parents.
He can't. Turns out there's no record of him.
Gregory, as far as the world is concerned, does not exist. He also seems to have been living inside the Pizzaplex based on areas where it looks like someone has been living. But it seems that once Vanessa starts chasing him, he realized he needs to get out. But there's one final nail in the coffin. It's a weird thing that happens in the game, but it actually kind of makes sense. Whenever Vanny is nearby Gregory, the screen gets all glitchy, completely covered with static, similar to the camera static. Why? This doesn't make much sense unless Gregory is a robot. No, seriously. There's no explanation as to why a regular person would get glitchy eyes when a supreme hacker with a spirit in the form of a computer virus infecting her is nearby. It actually does make a lot of sense, and it explains why Gregory doesn't exist. But if Gregory is a robot, is he a robot version of someone specific? Well, as I said, yes, Gregory really is a version of the bite victim. Back when He Told Me Everything came out, I created a theory that I used to think would be my backup in case Golden Duo ever got debunked. I called the theory bot victim, and the theory was that sometime after the bite, a robotic version of the bite victim was created. In hindsight, that theory was stupid, not as a theory itself, but the fact that the theory came from He Told Me Everything. That story has nothing to do with the bite victim being a robot, so I don't know why that was my thought, but whatever. My point is that it's possible that the theory was true to a certain extent, and that Gregory is a bite victim bot. One of Freddy's lines when he gets Roxy's eyes is that Gregory looks different to him. If Gregory is a human, then technically Vanessa should look different when Freddy has Roxy's eyes too, because Vanessa is also a human. So I tested that out and went into the debug menu and gave Freddy Roxy's eyes at 3:30 a.m. and I looked at Vanessa and she didn't look any different. So does that mean something? And we can't forget that they literally look exactly the same, with only their clothes being different colors. So yeah, it's settled. Gregory is a bite victim robot. Got it? Good. Now throw it out the window because there's a better option. While some pieces of evidence for Gregory being a robot are difficult to explain under him being a human and not a robot, such as Vanessa looking the same with Roxy's eyes, there may be an explanation, but we don't really know what it is yet. Is it possible that Gregory is a robot? Yes, it is possible. But another theory I have makes more sense to me. That's right, the thumbnail was misleading you. Some of the voice lines in the game were actually censored by Steelwool, but you can see the uncensored lines in the files of the game. Towards the beginning of the game, when we go underneath the Pizzaplex into the utility tunnels, Freddy stops us and says this.
I feel you are broken.
Don't worry about it. I'm fine.
No, I feel that something is wrong. I am taking you to the first aid station.
This line of "I feel you are broken" clearly seems like a reference to the bite victim due to the Fredbear plushie, aka Charlotte in FNaF 4, saying to the bite victim that he is broken. Wait, but if the Fredbear plushie is the one to say that you're broken line in FNaF 4, does that mean Glamrock Freddy is actually Charlotte? Well, I don't think so, but we'll talk about Freddy later on in the video. But anyway, Freddy saying Gregory's broken proves that Gregory is some kind of bite victim. But going into the files and looking at the uncensored voice lines reveals this. The uncensored version of "I feel you are broken" is actually "I am detecting blood, you are injured." Your initial reaction to this may be that Charlie in the books bleeds even though she's a robot, and Map had even used that excuse, but that doesn't make sense. If Freddy can detect blood, that means if Gregory was a robot, Freddy would have detected that it was fake blood, and that means that Gregory does have real blood, because Freddy detecting blood means that he detects like the literal compound that creates blood, right? So I've heard a lot of people say that he could have just detected red like liquid or whatever coming out of his body and just assumed it was blood, and there's no evidence to suggest that Freddy can detect blood, but Freddy literally says he detects blood, so he can detect blood. It's literally what he says. So yeah, he can detect blood, and he would have detected it if it was fake blood if Gregory was a robot, and that's what throws this entire theory out the window. Except it doesn't really. I mean, it would, but only if you ignore what the game is implying here. When Freddy takes Gregory to the first aid station, they don't do anything there. All Gregory does is hide from Vanessa. After that, Freddy tells Gregory that he will keep him safe. They don't do anything at the first aid station, they just walk away. This seems to be implying that Freddy was lying to Gregory so that he could bring him to the first aid station to hide, because Freddy likely detected that Vanessa was nearby. If this is true, and it seems to be, the blood cannot really be used as evidence, meaning Gregory bot is still possible. Maybe there's other evidence against it that I'm not talking about now, but that's really the big one, and it's not a logical piece of evidence to debunk it, I guess. I don't believe Gregory bot, but it's not debunked by this blood thing. But I do think there's a much better explanation. Hey guys, Evan from the future here, Evan from editing, and I just wanted to record a little clip here to mention something that I didn't talk about in the video, and it's a little piece of evidence against Gregory bot that I didn't talk about, and it comes from my buddy the Duckman. If Gregory was a robot, why wouldn't Glitchtrap try to infect him, right? Like, Gregory would have been on the screen while Freddy was, right? So, and with Gregory inside Freddy, when Afton started possessing Freddy, technically if Gregory was a robot, Gregory should have been infected in that moment as well. The argument can't be made that Afton didn't know Gregory was a robot, because in the books, he knew from just looking at Charlie that she was a robot. He was like, oh, you're something beautiful, aren't you? Or something like that. And that's the thing. Gregory, if he's a robot, he's a super advanced robot. One that Afton would want on his side. So if he's a robot, technically Afton would have tried to infect him. So that's one piece of evidence against Gregory bot that I didn't talk about. So yeah, just, yeah. Enjoy the rest of the video. What really inspires new theories is something I talked about in my Step Closer video from about a month ago. Something you may have noticed about Gregory is that he has a band-aid over seemingly a cut right underneath his eye. Back when we first saw the images of the security breach statues by Funko, I immediately thought of how Pete in Step Closer got a cut underneath his eye from a fishing hook. I eventually decided that it was likely just a coincidence due to the fact that Gregory doesn't seem to have any similarities with Pete from Step Closer. Or does he? In another uncensored dialogue, we see that when Freddy says, "I feel something is wrong," in the scene where he quote-unquote detects blood, was originally supposed to be, "Your arm is cut badly," and after that there's a reaction from Gregory saying, "Ah, my arm." Now there's no way that this is a coincidence, and while that is most likely Freddy just lying, it definitely seems like it's trying to show us that there's a connection between Gregory and Step Closer. Not only that, other stories besides Step Closer have something happen to someone's arm. In Into the Pit, Spring Bonnie bites Oswald in the arm. In Lonely Freddy, the arm of the Yarg Foxy is ripped off, and in The New Kid, Golden Freddy bites Devin on the arm. And now with Step Closer and both the eye and arm connection, there was no way that this can be a coincidence. What if the events of Step Closer actually give us a clue as to who Gregory is? And I'm not really talking about the actual events, I'm talking about the curse. Not only that, but the first person to notice something weird is happening with Pete is none other than his younger brother Chuck, a character who seems to represent the crying child similar to Gregory. What's more is that when Chuck sees Pete after the fishhook accident, he thinks Pete looks like Frankenstein, which could be a reference to Dreadbear, a character who also seems to represent the bite victim. I know a lot of people are going to try to use this as mic victim evidence, but no, no. FNaF AR also seems to hint at curses being relevant with the Cursed Springtrap skin. It's not even called Cursed Springtrap, it is only called Curse. So, is it possible that curses are actually relevant to the FNaF game lore? Is it possible that curses can actually help us solve the lore of Security Breach? Maybe it can, but first we need to talk about a few other things. First off, I lied earlier when I said there was no explanation for the distorted vision. A very good possibility is that Vanny is using illusion discs. At 1 AM, Gregory and Freddy go into the recharge station and Gregory sees Vanny run past it. Gregory asks what that was, and Freddy responds with the best line in the entire game.
That is a fountain.
Freddy then says that he didn't see Vanny, which is suspicious, but fast forward to the fire ending, Freddy has Roxy's eyes, and when he gets to Vanny, he says that he can now see Vanny with his new eyes. Before, she was invisible to him. It's similar to the Dance With Me novelty glasses. Ballora is always there, but without the glasses, she's invisible. Vanny is always there, but the robots can't see her without Roxy's eyes. It's also interesting because it's Roxy's eyes that can see Vanny, and Shattered Roxy, aka the version of Roxy, after you get her eyes, has a similar mechanic to Ballora. She can't see you, but she can hear you really well and pinpoint where you are. This really seems connected to Ballora here. Is this a coincidence? I mean, I don't think so, because it's weird how many connections to Ballora there are in Security Breach. The Afton table showing Mrs. Afton as Ballora, the revamped Ballora music in the February trailer. Shattered Roxy's similar mechanic, the reveal of the story of Mrs. Afton in the CDs, and the mention of novelty glasses at the beginning of the game clearly connecting to the novelty glasses from Dance With Me, it really seems to be hinting at Ballora or Mrs. Afton's return. Hopefully we see that in a DLC, but yeah, anyway. Based on the fact that the bots can't see Vanny, she seems to be using illusion discs. This lines up with the distortion when Vanny comes close to Gregory, and it also makes sense with the sound made when Vanny is nearby, since illusion discs work by emitting a sound that changes your perspective. Also, if the other bots can't see Vanny, then if Gregory were a robot, and he doesn't have Roxy's eyes, why can he? There's also another option about Gregory. What if Gregory is actually a version of Cassidy instead? This is a perfect time to talk about Princess Quest. In the files of Security Breach, the princess in Princess Quest is stated to be Cassidy. The Princess Quest ending of Security Breach, as well as the end of Princess Quest 3, make it clear that Cassidy is saving Vanessa from Glitchtrap's control, considering in the end of Princess Quest 3, the post-credit image of Princess Quest ending. If you were to ask me what I just said there, I couldn't tell you. Considering in the post-credit image of the Princess Quest ending, we see this image. This image is very reminiscent of Happiest Day from FNaF World, with someone who seems to be Mike in the middle, Bite Victim on the left, and Elizabeth on the right. Elizabeth's connection to Vanessa is something I already talked about in a previous video, but this also places Gregory as the bite victim, which actually goes against him being a version of Cassidy. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that briefly. I do have a completely separate Princess Quest theory coming out soon and how it connects to Ultimate Custom Night and what it means for Ultimate Custom Night, so stay tuned for that. I'm really excited about that theory. I finished the script already, and it's probably going to be out soon. So like I said, this Princess Quest ending places Gregory as the bite victim, but also Mike as Glamrock Freddy. So is that really true? Well, let's talk about that next. In my mind, there's only two options as to who Glamrock Freddy really is: Mike or the bite victim. The bite victim makes sense in the way that he's basically protecting himself in the form of Gregory because he couldn't protect himself before. But Mike also makes sense in the way that he's protecting the modern day bite victim because he also couldn't do it before. He's learning from his mistakes. Before we go over the evidence for each of these characters, let's talk about why it can't be anyone else. It can't be Henry because honestly that's just stupid, and it completely throws the friends line completely out the window, and there's no evidence for that anyway. And it can't be a new spirit because Freddy is confirmed to be possessed, and if Freddy is possessed by a new spirit, it doesn't make sense that the rest aren't possessed, and we know for a fact that the others aren't possessed due to early in the game when it's clearly stated that Freddy is different compared to the other animatronics in the Pizzaplex.
I want to help you. Maybe they want to help you too.
I doubt it. For some reason, you're different.
And he can't be anyone else from the fire due to one thing. The FNaF 6 fire has been confirmed to not have worked. Mike and Henry were the only ones effectively killed in the fire. We know from FNaF 4 that the bite victim attached his spirit to Mike, meaning when Mike died from the fire, the bite victim's soul was free. But he couldn't go free without his friends, so Happy's Day doesn't happen until later in the timeline. The other spirits can transfer into other objects, such as the wires of the blob in the case of the puppet or something, but they can never really escape from underneath the Pizzaplex unless their circuit boards were used on other things inside the Pizzaplex. But I doubt other circuit boards would be used for the actual animatronics themselves. Maybe the staff bots, as I talked about in a previous video, but the core 4, Freddy, Chica, Monty, and Roxy, that doesn't make sense for them to have circuit boards from the Blob or Afton or something. So I don't think Puppet can be Freddy. The Puppet is really the only one in the fire besides Mike and the bite victim that really could have made sense to possess Freddy, but not only can the Puppet not escape, her spirit also seems to be elsewhere, possibly in the Blob and possibly in the nightmare-looking staff bots. There's evidence supporting either and possibly both, and like I said, I talked about that in a recent video, so go check that out if you haven't already. Okay, but now let's get to the evidence for Mike and the bite victim being Freddy. Let's start with Mike. Throughout the game, we have to find security badges so that we can level up and unlock certain doors around the Pizzaplex that we couldn't access before. In each security office, the security badge is located inside a miniature Freddy head with a security hat on, which could hint at Freddy being Mike because Mike is very commonly a security guard. But this is kind of disproved by a section in the game where Freddy says,
Vanessa, all the fast watches sound like me. It is the default voice option.
So that doesn't really prove it for really the same reason, but it could still be a reference. The biggest piece of evidence for Freddy being Mike, besides the Princess Quest ending, is the fact that Freddy's first thought when leaving the building is to burn it down and die in order to destroy the enemy. This seems like a reference to FNaF 6 and FNaF 3. Mike burns down FNaF 3 and tries to kill the enemy, Springtrap. In FNaF 6, Mike helps Henry gather the enemies, the scrap animatronics, into one place and goes down in the fire with them because he thinks it will kill them. Of course, he's wrong, but doing the same thing in the fire ending seems to imply that Mike is Glamrock Freddy. Another thing I've heard people talk about is Freddy's voice line of,
I found myself for the first
Molten
time
Freddy.
when I cleared the path. I did not want to, but I had no choice.
Could this be literal? As in, he first found himself when he found Mike, his own dead body? He also says that he had no choice and he found himself for the first time. This could imply that Freddy was first possessed by Mike when he found Mike's body under FNaF 6, and he had no choice because it was Vanessa when Freddy maybe could have been hacked by Glitchtrap, but when Mike possessed it, he was able to fight off the infection of Glitchtrap. Or maybe his spirit just overtook Glitchtrap. Another thought I had about writing the script is, what if these lines are trying to say that Mike, before he even died, was forced by Circus Baby to clear a path so as to protect the animatronics so they could survive the fire. I severely doubt this, but it would be really interesting. Overall, I think Mike being Freddy is true, mostly just based on the Princess Quest ending, honestly. I think that evidence is enough. It still could possibly be the bite victim based on the line about Freddy's friends being down there, and that line seems to be referencing the Blob and the missing children. Mike wasn't really friends with the missing children, and I don't really have a solid explanation for this, but I think there's more evidence for Freddy being Mike rather than the bite victim. But Mike saying the Blob are his friends could just be saying that he redeemed himself after the bite in some way. Or possibly, similar to the fourth closet, when Mike is injected with Remnant in its sister location by the Scooper, he puts the pieces of the missing children's souls back together. This could also be the reason Afton has to manipulate them in FNaF 6, and why they booted out Baby, because they are now more sentient, and they remember everything, and they can take control. Who knows? It's also worth noting that Freddy says he will protect us from his friends, and in the boss battle he only protects us from Roxy and the Blob. I don't think just Roxy is possessed, or any of the Glamrocks are possessed, so that doesn't make sense. This just implies that the friends line really is talking about the Blob. So Mike is Glamrock Freddy, and Gregory represents the bite victim. He is kind of a normal kid though. I mean, he is weird and there's something not right about him. I heard someone say that he looks like one of the missing children we see in the newspapers of the Leave ending, so maybe it's possible that he died and was revived, but I'm still unsure if revival actually is possible. If it is, then maybe that's why he looks different, because he's revived and he has like a piece of someone's soul attached to him or something like that. But then that would also not make sense for Glitchtrap being in Vanessa, because then why would she still not look different? But hey, maybe he went missing but escaped, and that's why he doesn't trust Vanessa or something. In the files, the line at the beginning of the game where Gregory says he doesn't trust Vanessa was actually censored, and the original line was, "She's trying to kill me." And if he was kidnapped by her, it could explain how he knows this. But it's unclear how he would know Vanessa's Vanny, and he also never sees Vanny herself in the bunny costume until 1 AM. So unless Gregory was kidnapped by Vanessa while she was in her guard uniform, that can't really be true. And I don't think Vanessa would have a bunny costume if when she lures kids she doesn't even use it. But hey, it's kind of possible, but I'll just say for the sake of this video that Gregory is a normal kid that represents the bite victim. With his connections to Step Closer though, is it possible that Gregory represents the curse on Michael Afton? Hear me out here. FNaF 4 is a nightmare the bite victim gives Mike. We know for a fact that the player of FNaF 4 is Mike from the FNaF 1 phone call playing over the nights, as well as the survival logbook with Mike drawing Fredbear. A lot of people don't believe this for some reason due to the hospital Easter eggs, but my question to you is, how is the kid in the coma going to take pills? Like, he's literally not. Those are for Mike. And the hospital Easter eggs make sense if you take into account the fact that it seems to be the bite victim doing this. It's like torture. So he's like making Mike remember and face the past. Based on Step Closer and Dance With Me and a few other stories, it seems like the bite victim puts a curse on Mike, which possibly lures in Shadow Freddy. Even after the bite victim forgives Mike, after maybe going to FNaF 3 or something to show that he still cares, it seems like Shadow Freddy doesn't stop. It seems like Mike has to go back to the place the curse originated from. The bite victim gave him a curse as revenge for the bite of 83, which is at Fredbear's family diner. So like I said, Mike goes to FNaF 3, but that still doesn't work because that's not Fredbear's. And we know that it doesn't work because Shadow Freddy is still there following Mike around, as we see with this Easter egg. So Mike goes to FNaF 6, and if the FNaF 6 building really is a repurposed Fredbear's family diner, coming here to finish the job and complete his goal of killing his murderer father, that would release the curse, but with Mike's death, it's possible that it doesn't. In Step Closer, Pete goes on his way back to Freddy's to redeem himself and break the curse, but on his way back, he dies. Then he wakes up in his own dead body, and since he died while he still had the curse, he could still hear and see everything, and feel everything. It's possible that the same thing happened with Mike. He dies before the curse can be broken, and he stays awake in his own dead body. Eventually, Vanny brings down the hacked Glamrock Freddy to clear the path to Afton, and while doing so, Freddy finds Mike's body, and his soul is transferred into Freddy, but he also loses his memories. Eventually, he regains them, but before that can happen, he finds Gregory, a kid who looks just like his younger brother, the bite victim. all of Security Breach is Mike trying to break the curse and finally make amends with his brother. And maybe he regains his memory because the curse was broken when he returns to FNaF 6 once again. Gregory may be a regular kid, but he is a representation of the curse set on Mike. A test on Mike to redeem himself and finally have a clear conscience. But hey, that's all for the theory. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments if you agree with the theory or if you have any other thoughts on who Gregory can be. I still think Gregory possibly could be a robot, so let me know if you guys believe he is, or if you want, you can comment any proof against it that I haven't thought of. If you believe Gregory and Freddy are different people from who I theorized, or if you believe Gregory is a normal kid with no connection with the bite victim, that's completely fine. It's just opinions, I guess, right? So yeah, anyways guys, I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, then please do leave a like and subscribe. I still have quite a few more theories on the way. A few scripts are done, so stay tuned for those videos. And yeah, I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys.